Hi, I'm Gary with Successful Gardens, and in this video I'm going to show you step-by-step process of how to transplant new seedlings. Now, a couple weeks ago I planted tomatoes and peppers in hopes of having plants grown to plant in my garden. Now, as they have germinated and grown, they need to be put up into larger pots so that they can develop the roots and into a larger, healthier plant before I place them out in my garden in about 6 weeks. So, let's see how it's done. It's just been just over 2 weeks since I started my seeds indoors. I had them on the heat mat, I planted them, and now 2 weeks later, most of the tomatoes, I should say all of the tomatoes and most of the peppers are starting to get their second leaves. And so this is a perfect time to start transplanting. When we started the seeds, we had a fine grain seed starting mix. Now we need to transplant those up into a coarser type of potting soil, and this will allow for better drainage, and that will allow for better root development. Now, another thing that you also need to worry about is, there again, the quality of your potting soil. When we start seeds, we start with a seedling mix. It's a finer grind or a finer grade of potting soil. The perlite is really fine because you don't want to lose your seeds when they get watered. But now that we're going to transplant those up, you actually get a larger or a coarser grind on your peat moss. This has been wet down. You can see larger bits of perlite in that pot or in this soil. And so this is what I'm going to be planting into or transplanting up. Now, I have my records of the type of seeds that I planted. On this particular list, I have my peppers and I have my tomatoes. We're not going to worry about the transplanting the onions. They're growing just fine in that onion seedling tray that I have. Now, when you start to, or when you get ready to transplant, as you get your seedlings ready, you want to make sure that the soil is very moist. That way, when you take your new seedlings and put them into your potting soil, and then that's when you want to water after they have been planted, that's when you would want to then add water once the transplants have been once the seedlings have been transplanted up into the trays. Also, make sure you do one variety at a time and mark those varieties so you don't get your vegetables mixed up. One of the biggest surprises that you can have is thinking that you're planting sweet peppers in your garden, and all of a sudden you get a hot pepper mixed into that sweet pepper bed. And I have one bed just dedicated to sweet peppers, and then I have another bed that is dedicated just to hot peppers. I have a bed for my saucing tomatoes, and I have a bed for my beefsteak tomatoes, and so I like to separate those out. But that's for another time when we actually get ready to plant these in the garden. We've got everything ready here, so we are going to start transplanting. All right, I've got my records here so that as I go through transplanting and I can record how many I had successfully germinate from the seeds that I planted. I've got new tags because, as you can see, the tags here have started to fade because of the watering and the extra humidity with this being in a seed tray. So I've got new tags. We have our potting soil. I go ahead and make a depression in each of these pots. I just use my finger. You can use a dibble or a large pan. It just depends on what size of cell that you have, that your seedlings are coming from. And so with that, as I've made those holes, I'm ready to go. I'm going to just start with my tomatoes. So let's get planting. As you can see with this seedling, I've got 2 plants that are growing, so there must have been 2 seeds that were planted. But look at that root formation. Now in a situation like this, what I need to make the hard decision, and believe me, it's a hard decision to do, rather than trying to separate those seedlings and taking the chance of ruining certain roots and actually losing both of these plants, I'm actually just going to now just snip off this one plant right here and plant just this one. Hard decision, but important that you do, rather than trying to grow those 2 seedlings together. Now I have my tomatoes transplanted up into these pots. Now I'm ready to water these in. One thing that you want to do very soon after you have transplanted your seedlings is to start fertilizing them. And you want to be careful with the fertilizer that you use. I like to use a balanced fertilizer, a water-soluble fertilizer. I happen to use this Fertilome fertilizer. It's a 20-20-20, so it's a balanced water-soluble fertilizer. You can use a Miracle Grow one. Schultz has a fertilizer out there. You can find several organic ones that have like fish emulsion. But you want to be careful. You want to use especially right at first, you want to use a weaker solution. So what I have done is I have mixed up a gallon of the solution, and for my initial watering, I will use this smaller watering can to fertilize those in. Now I'll just water those pots in. So we're getting good water coverage or thorough watering throughout the whole cell, as you see that. And that just kind of settles down those. And with it being a weaker fertilizer, you don't have to worry about it burning those new roots that you just put in or those tender foliage. I don't know if you can see on some of these plants how you can see the darker veins, or on the underside of the new leaves, They're purple. And then some of these leaves are really light green. That's an indicator of that they're hungry. They're looking for some food more than what has been available for them. So that's why you want to start fertilizing right after you get them transplanted. Now, if you go with a weak or a mild solution, you can fertilize every time you water. I usually try to go every other watering. That way I don't get excessive growth on the plants while they're still under the lights, but I'm still giving them the nutrients that they need to develop their roots and to grow healthy stems and leaves. All right, so let me continue watering, and then I'll jump over and start transplanting the peppers. My first one is Hungarian wax. I had originally planted 8. As you can see with this, I only had 4 cells or 4 seeds germinate, so I had a 50% germination. There's still plenty of time for me to plant seeds, more pepper seeds. They'll be a little smaller than what these when we get ready to go in the garden, but I still have a good 6 weeks before I'm ready to plant peppers out in the garden due to temperatures. So I will make those adjustments and those notes on my information sheet that I have that I started when I started the seeds. So this first one is Hungarian wax. Since I have a couple of cell packs left over, I now have to make the decision of whether I want to plant up these extra peppers or these extra tomatoes. I need to go ahead and fertilize and water the peppers in like I did the tomatoes. And then with that, I will put them back under the lights. I've turned off the heat mat. Once you have transplanted your seedlings up into larger pots, you don't need a heat mat underneath to help the growth. In fact, if the roots of plants get too hot, that can actually hinder their growth, and so you won't get a very viable plant. They can actually become sick and wilt and die. I will lower my lights down onto the top of these. After that, then I'm going to water on a regular basis, fertilize once a week, and in about 6 weeks, which will get me to the middle of May, I will be then ready to set them out in the garden. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. It's really not that hard, but there are some important steps in having a successful transplant once the seeds have germinated. If you found this video to be helpful and beneficial, please hit that like button. But more importantly, I want to hear about your garden. What seeds did you start indoors? What seeds or plants are you transplanting up? Go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Until next time, let's keep growing.